welcome to episode 13 of the Articulate Ox podcast, where artists talk about the art that made them artistic. My name is Soma79, and I am your host. Thank you so much for joining us. My guest today is Pilze Beats, and Pilze is the man. I have known him for so long. Him and I have been in multiple groups together, Project Mayhem, Mic Monarchy. I guess it's just two, but two is still multiple. And he was a really kick-ass MC back in the day, came hard with the punchlines. And since then, he's been focusing on music production. Him and I have worked together recently on a couple of tracks with Columbus, Ohio underground hip-hop legend Copywrite, and Onest from the Boston area, who's another absolute beast of an MC. So we've got a couple songs that are already out, Seinfeld and Crown Me Now. We have some more that are still coming. And yeah, so Pilze came on, wanted to talk about Bruce Lee, which I didn't know how much of, because Pilze's a hip hop producer, I didn't know how much of Bruce Lee we're actually going to talk during this conversation, because obviously it's martial arts and he's a hip hop producer. But we really stuck to the subject for a lot of the conversation, and it was a great talk. So hope you enjoy it, and thank you so much for checking out another episode of the Articulate Ox. Hey, this is Soma79, host of the Articulate Ox podcast. I'm here with my guest this week, my man, Pilze Beats. What's going on, man?
What's up, brother?
How you doing?
I'm living, you know what I mean?
Sweet,
just living
man.
this roller coaster of life.
Yeah.
The world is banana land right now.
So Pilze is a producer, former MC from the group that he and I were both in, Mic Monarchy, and I guess Project Mayhem also from back in the day. We're going back a long time ago. Now he's focusing on production and mixing and mastering. He produced a few songs that we're working on together with Onest and Copywrite. So pretty excited about that. I think at least a couple of them should be out by the time this is out, Crown Me Now and Seinfeld. So you can hear Pilze's beats on that. And then Dirty City Records is also his thing he does with Onest as well. And that is all over the streaming services. So check that shit out.
Appreciate it, brother.
Hey, anytime. So the topic you chose was Bruce Lee. I think you're the first person to choose a topic in a different medium than they actually work in, unless you're kicking your beats into existence. But which I thought was a very interesting conversation. So why don't you talk a little bit about yourself, about how you got into Bruce Lee, and we'll kick it off from there.
Yeah, man. Well, even I don't know, I think it's funny too, because you'd figure that I would pick something with production or music, my favorite producer, or you know what I mean, my favorite, I don't know, DJ or engineer, or you know what I mean, anything to do with that. And I got introduced to Bruce Lee movies when I was honestly, I don't even remember how old I was. I was real little. But my uncle Richard, who my middle name is Richard. I'm named after my uncle Richard. He showed me Bruce Lee movies. Me and my older brother would go sleep over his house when we were really little, and we'd eat popcorn and lay on the floor and stuff. And he'd always put on old kung fu movies. And I remember, I'll never forget, he put on a Bruce Lee movie. I believe it was Game of Death. He put that on, and I just remember just completely blown away. I was like, who is this dude? Dude just had so much swag and just mad charisma, and just everything he stood for was just just also him just be able to just destroy a room full of people. I was like, I want to do that. You know what I mean? I want to be, who doesn't want to be able to do that? No. So that also got me into martial arts at a young age and stuff, going to kung fu and things like that. And became pretty obsessed with it when I was a kid. It was,
really?
Yeah. It was really, really good for me, because I got into trouble at school a lot, always get into fights and stuff, I was always smaller than everybody else. And so, especially looking at somebody, Bruce Lee, not a big dude, right. But I'd also, most dudes in the room wouldn't mess with that guy. So to me, I was always that was so intriguing to me, to be somebody, not a large man, but I'm sure anybody in the room would have been yeah, no, I'll avoid that fight.
Yeah.
So to me, that was always so impressive.
Yeah.
And
I've never really thought about pushing you around. I don't think it's a great idea.
I'm saying,
I don't know what you're gonna do.
yeah, well, see, I'm saying, like, also growing up, everybody called me a ninja and stuff, and like, it was definitely from like growing up doing kung fu, and you know what I mean, learning a thing or two about a thing or two.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I also remember years ago being at your house and seeing a tarantula. So I don't know if like you're gonna pull some of that shit out of your pocket or what. So
Yeah, I'm saying you never know what you're gonna get.
yeah, that gave me nightmares. So how far did you really take the martial arts?
I got super into it. I got like serious into it. Like we like our school used to. I'll never forget too. That's how I became such a big fan of MMA. Ironically, is my kung fu school. We used to go to these like big expos or whatever. You know, our school would like you know show our stuff, and like we went to some big expo, and there was a bunch of other martial arts schools there, or like just like kickboxing and boxing and karate and judo, or, you know, jujitsu, whatever. And everybody was a giant expo, and everybody was kind of showing off their school, showing everybody what they got. And people are sitting there kind of doing like, you know, forms or whatever, you know what I mean? Just kind of showing, you know, what they're about. And I'll never forget, there was a little corner and it had a cage in it, and the place was packed. Everybody was surrounded around the thing, and you know, I was small. I kind of wiggled my way through,
Yeah.
climbed my way to the front, and it was Pride, and it was Pride showing
Oh
off.
shit.
It was Pride showing off their stuff. They
Like
were at the
around what year would this have been?
oh, this was in the 90s.
Oh wow.
This was like late 90s, early 2000s.
That was back before they figured out that the goal was to choke each other out all the time. It was like it
Yeah,
was that was back when there was actually more styles clash, weren't they, in a lot of the fights?
right. Well, because back then they didn't really have like weight classes or anything like that. Like there was pretty much no rules,
Yeah.
especially like even in Pride particular, like they didn't have rules. You know what I mean? It was like you could jump up on 2 feet and jump on somebody's head if you wanted to. Like
Yeah. It was a little
there
more
was
like Street Fighter, the video game.
right. Yeah,
It was like
absolutely.
some big round dude versus some little skinny dude, and they both had different skill sets, you know?
Right. It was like some like real life Mortal Kombat stuff. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
Yeah.
and so like I'll
Good old
never
days.
forget though. I remember I wiggled my way through the crowd. I saw, you know, some big dude, you know, like and some little dude, you know, beating the bag out of the, you know, the bigger dude. And, you know, like they went to the floor, guy like, you know, threw him an arm bar, like almost broke his arm. And, you know, the guy was tiny. And so everybody was like, whoa, like
Shit.
that was impressive.
You
It was
must
the
know
first time I
something.
really saw mixed martial arts, like
Yeah.
literally the point of mixed martial arts is like your style versus my style.
Yeah. That's a
And
good point, because back then that's really where that term came from, was it was we're mixing different types of martial arts, but now it's
right,
like they've all been mixed into this one sort of thing that most people do, because
right,
it's the thing that wins matches, the strategy
right.
that,
Well,
you know. That's a
well,
huge
and
overgeneralization, but you know.
it was actually funny because I got into a fight with some kid, and I never argue with anybody. Like I never comment on YouTube videos or anything like that. Like
That's my saying is you can find me in a lot of places, but you never find me in the comment section.
yeah.
It's
And
not worth it.
the only I think the only time I've ever like commented to like get into an argument was somebody was like Bruce Lee would have like, you know, gotten like killed in mixed martial arts nowadays. And I go, what are you talking about? And I thought about it. I go, literally Bruce Lee is like the godfather of mixed martial arts. He
Yeah.
was the first guy to be, he studied Wing Chun, which is like, you know, stands for shorthand fist. Like it's fighting in close combat quarters and, you know, just being that close to somebody's hands. And then he realized, he goes, that's not going to win any fight. You know, like not every fight. What if the guy picks you up and throws you on the ground? You know, where's
Yeah.
all your, like, it's like almost like a boxer fighting a wrestler. It's like you could be the best boxer in the world, but if that wrestler is really good and grabs you and drops you on your back, your whole skill set and game plan is gone now.
Right.
You know what I mean? That guy will maul you on the ground. So he was the first guy to be like, hey, maybe I should study a little bit like Western boxing and a little bit of wrestling. And he was the first guy to really take, you know, not realize that this style is better than your style and argue that point. He was like, hey, if I know a little bit of everything, I'm an all around better fighter. And I love the fact that he was like, you know, kind of really the first guy to really do that, or at least make it mainstream and kind of mix and blend, take a melting pot of styles of martial arts, put them together. and know that you can win a fight in any way, whether you go to the ground, whether you're standing up, whether, you know, the guy's bigger than you can, there's things you can use to your advantage against his, you know, weakness.
Yeah. It's also it's the shape he was in is absolutely ridiculous. Like when you see, I was watching that Be Water, the 30 for 30 documentary earlier today. And it's funny when you
I
see
thought
him.
that was too short.
Yeah.
It was too short. I feel like they glossed over a lot of stuff, but
They
go on.
definitely could have put a lot more in. When you saw him, it was sort of like, I was thinking about how they have unrealistic size for a lot of women's clothes. And when you figure who that is based on is like a Barbie doll type thing. And I was thinking about if they based the way men's pants fit off of the way they fit off Bruce Lee, then men would know what that feels like. Because you're looking at it, you're like, oh, that's the way you're supposed to have your, like, his pants look high, but they just fit perfectly around this waist. That's like the epitome of health. And you're like, oh, that's what we're supposed to work. We're all working backwards from.
Right.
And that was with nutrition in like this in the 60s and 70s. Like imagine, I mean, that comparing him to modern day UFC guys, I mean, MMA guys, you can imagine what he could do with modern nutrition science and things like that. And he was already way ahead of his time.
Right, exactly. Like even like most MMA fighters nowadays, like you'll have a nutritionist, you know what I mean? You'll have somebody watching your diet, like, because I mean, if you know anything about exercise, that's like literally 50% of it. Like you could work out all you want, but if you go home and eat Taco Bell every night, you know what I mean? You're only working towards the goal halfway, because the other half of it is really like, you know, eat, like, you know, like just being healthy and just the other side of like not just, you know, not just working out's gonna cut it, you know.
Right. And it's once you make that change, it's, I mean, I get to a point, maybe it's because I'm getting older now, is that I can't eat like crap for more than like a day, and then I'm just gonna feel miserable for way too long. It affects your sleep, and it becomes this like snowball effect where you're never quite back to your normal self until you just start getting on that treadmill again.
Right. And even then it gets harder and harder as you get older to A, find the motivation to do that, and B, you know, just be able to stick with the routine.
Right. And I've literally fallen off a treadmill twice in my life. So.
Well, honestly, I could see that happening though. That could be pretty easy to happen.
Yeah, it is, because I do have one in my house. I use the elliptical more often, but there is something about the treadmill where you do feel like you're always like an inch away from like a Final Destination style death.
Oh, dude, I'm always just one wrong step away from just, you know, like, especially if you're going full steam, you know what I mean? It's hard to slow down from that, you know what I mean? You take one wrong step, you're gone.
I knew someone who was on a treadmill, and they that happened, and they get spit off the back and ran into a mirror.
Did they break the mirror?
Yes. And
that's
the mirror,
awesome.
Yeah, no, I don't. But
I hope they're okay. But
they got pretty caught up. Like it's a dangerous game you play. I don't know.
See, know what the problem is? They didn't videotape it and put it on the internet.
Yeah, I know. They could have been.
That's the real shame right there.
Yeah. But yeah, it's. I did it once at a gym, and I just like, because what happened was I don't know how this happened, but the person before me didn't turn it off. So I stepped on it.
Step on it already.
And like I had my headphones on. There's a bunch of other ones. So like, and you never think to go, let me make sure it's off, because it's always like, why wouldn't it be off? And I just stepped on it and just did it immediately. And
well, then if that's the case, that's not your fault then.
It wasn't, but I couldn't go around everybody in the gym and explain that.
Like, yeah, that's true. Well, it was already on. Never.
Right. Like, no, you're an idiot. And then like, just to save face, I got up on it and still ran for like 30 minutes. I was like, I'm not.
You have to, because you have to run long enough to try to run away from the embarrassment moment.
Right. And I had to make sure I hadn't broken anything too. So.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that was a fun day. So let's talk a little bit about how, you know, you and I have been working on music together for a long time. Like I mentioned before, we were in Project Mayhem together, which is a pretty large crew out of the most of you guys are out of the Quincy area.
Yeah, the South Shore.
Yep, up there, Massachusetts. And then we did a little Mic Monarchy, you, myself, Narconics, DJ Wise One. We did that for a few years. Had some fun opening for people like Onyx and Warren G, I think, and Slain and Ill Bill, and a bunch of other people coming to the
Ari the Rugged Man.
Ari the Rugged Man, yes.
We actually opened up for him on Halloween 2 years in a row.
Right, that is very true. Yes. I think maybe Copywrite as well, who we've been doing some work with now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So then, cut forward a bunch of years. I kind of stopped rapping, and then during the pandemic, I decided to finish my long unawaited by anybody album, Drinking Songs for Children, which required you to re-record part of one of your verses for that. So thank you very much.
That was also difficult because I also I took a hiatus from music. I kind of just stepped back and I just studied the business side of it for like at least like I don't know, probably like over a year. And then I got back and I started producing again. And then I went in heavy doing that and doing engineering, mixing, mastering, and also DJing live shows and stuff like that, and DJing for other people's sets, and
Sweet.
kind of that's how I got back into it as well.
Yeah, the response for Crown Me of our song Crown Me Now with me, you, Copywrite and Onest and DJ Slipwax has been really great. I
That song came
it's
out fire.
Yeah, I love that. I think people are gonna dig Seinfeld, and I think we got a few more in the chamber that are still still yet to come out. So I'm very excited about that.
Uh,
So how did Bruce Lee and was there any line between Bruce Lee and your music stuff? Like, did you apply a similar attitude to the mental arts? Like, walk us through that a little bit.
well, so like the reason why I picked that too, it's because not only was like to me he was just super inspirational, got me in martial arts at a young age, which also like kept me out of a lot of trouble, and also taught me a lot about like when you take martial arts, it's funny how like you'd figure going into something learning how to hurt somebody, you'd become like um
Johnny
like
Lawrence.
yeah, you know what I mean. You not walk around. It's ironic that you go in there and you learn so much stuff about like respect towards others, self-respect, and once I feel like once you learn you can hurt somebody, like you don't want to, you know what I mean. It's like your morality, you know what I mean, kicks
Right.
in, and you know what I mean. Once you like, I'm sure Bruce Lee walked around and had no point to prove to anybody, because he's like, and walking into a room, he's like, I could beat up all of you, like,
Right.
already in the back of his head. So it's like he has no point to prove. He doesn't have to walk around like a tough guy. If anything, you learn to avoid fights,
Right.
and which is a good thing.
Because
And
anything can happen in a fight. It's
oh
like
yeah,
there's no guarantees.
oh man, I was at a beach party one time, and I watched some kid get punched. He fell off the curb, hit his head on the fell off of like basically fell and hit his head onto the curb, and went into a coma. And you know what I mean? Like it was
Wow.
crazy. The kid was in the coma for like 9 months. The other kid was facing like possible like manslaughter charges and stuff. So like
Wow.
even then, like I've seen crazy stuff happen. Like and that's when I was pretty young, and I've seen a lot of crazy stuff happen in my life.
I
Like
was at a party once that was on a back porch in like Alston, Brighton, which those are wicked, pretty old. And I don't know what happened between these two people. They started fighting, and the porch was like rocking. And I had to I had to grab one of them, and I put him in like a full Nelson just because someone else was grabbing the other, so they couldn't do anything. And then he went back, and me and him went through a table, and I could feel the thing, like, because you hear about these porches collapsing all the time, and I was like, my good lord, like,
yeah, you could have went off a second story real
yeah,
quick.
we all could have. The whole thing could have like crashed down. And
Right.
it's just,
Like
yeah, it's anything can
like
happen when you start. It's like we want to avoid violence at all costs.
right. And plus, like I've seen like especially like outside of shows and stuff like that, you've seen it like outside of
Yeah.
shows, people are drunk at the end of the night, and like, it's better to know how to avoid a fight, than run into one, you know what I mean? Because I've seen crazy stuff happen at the end of the night, and people go through windows, you know what I mean? And
Outside of the Onyx show, when we opened for Onyx, I think some friend of mine at the time, I think it was a friend of my girlfriend in particular, she showed up and she got the perfect parking spot right in front, like the one right in front of Harper's Ferry, which is now Brighton Music Hall, I think. And
oh, is that when Frangie and Lopez got into a fight?
I think there was
Well, they
someone.
didn't get into a fight. Some other kid like backhanded, I think, Lopez, and like broke his cheekbone.
Oh, okay. This I think has something to do with a Marine and possibly someone's girlfriend and possibly somebody also in our group. I don't remember
Oh, I know what one you're talking about. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And I remember how happy she was when she got that parking spot, but her car got all dinged up because of that fight.
yeah, yeah. So like I'm saying, like like you've seen it a million times, especially
Yeah.
like being in like the music scene, how we are going to shows and everything like that. Like you're
Yeah.
more likely to run into a scenario like that when, when like people have been drinking all night
There's a
and
high knucklehead factor at a lot of these shows. You know,
absolutely.
and the other thing too about a lot of those shows too is, hip hop's got all love and it's also got all hate it sometimes. And the sort of problem with the hip hop scene at that point is that a lot of the people in the crowd were just other like you have a main you have an attraction that'd be the headliner, someone that we all dig. I'm not going to name names, but a big name at some point, and they'd come in. But the reality was they couldn't really fill the club themselves even at that point because there were so many shows and so many venues. So they'd bring in these crews to sort of like us to sort of like sell a bunch of tickets and things like that. But it ended up being you're only performing for your friends and other rappers and their friends. And it was
Yeah,
like, and so then it wasn't like the all love feeling because half the time you had people fighting over like nothing.
right, exactly. And like even then people would like, start to, like catch feelings towards other people that like got a higher spot in the show, like something close, like,
Right.
there's plenty of shows that we played that, we went on right before the opening act. And, even
Right.
that I'm sure like brews something within other people. And then, when you guys all walk outside, sometimes people have words.
Right. And it would be like a status symbol about, well, I got to play the Middle East. Well, I got to play downstairs. Well, I got to actually go in the green room and I got to do this. And
Right,
like,
right, right,
it's
right. A
just
little
like my
bickering
wristband
over
was this color.
yeah, just for like little dumb
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it's the way to make the already difficult music industry even harder. Because that's the
Yeah,
funny thing about being in a group is it's sort of like being in a relationship with multiple people. And it's hard enough to be in a relationship with one person and like, let alone like, you know, who essentially have one thing in common, the music, and then like a lot of the other stuff is just the stuff that goes with it.
right.
So do we even get back to the music production part? The same
No,
sort of
no, no. So as far as like at least like with the Bruce Lee thing with the production thing. So with that, like I just found not only was he, like a, great martial artist, but also he was like a huge philosopher. And like he even has books like, that are published that are just about his philosophies and his theories towards things. Cause like he used to just write a lot of stuff down and just like his just thoughts and things like that, and
Yeah.
just the way he thought about things.
Anything in Enter
Um,
the Dragon where you hear him say anything the least bit philosophical was something that he put in. I mean, essentially, like because it's to enhance the script, and a lot of that was stuff that it was his inclusion to make sure is in there because he wanted to make sure that he was giving out a certain message and he was getting himself across.
right, because like that's one thing I love about him too. Like his movies were always like had some sort of like deeper meaning to them. It was like, don't get me wrong, like the fight scenes were crazy, and you walked I'm sure everybody walked out of a Bruce Lee movie back then, and walked out there and was like, yeah, you know
Yeah,
what I mean? Just
I'm
like,
sure. Yeah,
you walk out there all hyped up, like, oh man, which was another like great thing about him. He was just super inspiring. You walked out there thinking like, man, I wish I could do that, which inspires other people to do that. But
and
also
he
like, he was a great philosopher, and he always had a deeper meaning in all of his movies. For instance, in The Game of Death, I think that was the first Bruce Lee movie, at least the one that comes to mind, the first one I actually really remember watching. And in it, he has a yellow
yeah.
tracksuit with just the black stripe down the side. And they asked him like, you like, why are you gonna wear that? You know what I mean? It's just like a weird jogging one piece. Like it looks like almost something like a dancer, like a ballerina would wear or something. You know what I mean? And he was like, oh, like instead of having a karate gi or you know what I mean, one of those,
Yeah.
like just wearing like anything else that would signify I'm this or I'm that. He goes, I want to wear this because it stands for nothing. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean I have any style, which was like the one of his greatest philosophies. He was like, the best style, you know what I
Is
mean, is no
no
style at
style.
all.
Yeah.
To have no style, to just basically just freely express yourself, however that is. And
Yeah.
to me,
What's the defense for that?
yeah, and that's beautiful. Also
Yeah.
beautifully said. That's like also like his martial arts was like poetry in motion. You know what I mean? He was able to combine so many different styles and make that part of his style. And one of his other great quotes was something along the lines of like use basically what's useful to you and disregard the rest. Where like just because everybody's saying this is how you have to do it, this is how you have to do it. It's like, no, there's no, it's almost like how even learning works. It's like no two people learn the same way. You know what I mean? No two people think that not everybody thinks the same way. So, explaining it in one way to one person might not translate to the other person.
I think what's hidden behind that a little bit is sort of the idea of first teach yourself to have good judgment and then apply that judgment. Because it's like it's hard to teach yourself how to have good judgment. It involves discipline, involves inner thought, involves a lot of different things that are uncomfortable to do. But once you have that judgment, you can trust it to say this is for me and this isn't for me.
Right, right. And once you get past that, you almost it's almost like you got to try everything once to see what works.
Right.
And you know what I mean? If something, it's ironic how all of a sudden you'll find something that just like makes sense to you. Right. You know what I mean? That's natural to you and works for you, whatever that may be.
And anybody who's ever done like a lot of yoga will probably tell you that like there's some poses that some bodies will just never get in no matter what. And it's like, and there has to be an acceptance that not all of us have the same limits, not all of us have the same capabilities. And the same way that when I shook Billy Corgan's hand once and the guy's fingers went out to like here on me, and you're just like, well, that certainly must give him an edge when he's playing guitar, and you're just like, sometimes you have to accept that our bodies are what our bodies are, and but to have the knowledge of that and to not force it in a direction is not, it doesn't want to go in, and just be water, as he says, and fill the vessel that you have.
Right, which is once again another great metaphor that he has, like as like his philosophy towards things. He's like, you put the water in the teapot, it becomes a teapot. You put it in the cup, it becomes a cup.
Yep.
And like,
and it can flow and it can crash.
Yeah, he's like, and like it's crazy because it's like it could be like the smoothest thing ever. You know what I mean? Or it's like if there's a tidal wave, it could destroy everything. So it's like what a great metaphor.
Yeah, it is for sure.
Also, on the Billy Corgan thing, Billy Corgan, Smashing Pumpkins, Homer Simpson smiling politely. I know. With the second you said that popped in my head, and that might be one of the funniest things I've ever heard.
It was so trippy to me when that episode came out, and Cypress Hill and Sonic Youth and Smashing Pumpkins were on The Simpsons, and it was really
on the festival.
Yeah, it was like the fake Lollapalooza, and it was really the beginning. It was a milestone because that was the last time I think I saw Billy Corgan with a full head of hair, because he was animated there with the hair.
Oh, and I remember
the first time I ever saw them on tour was the Siamese Dream tour, and he still had his hair back then.
Yeah,
and then after that, he pretty much had the zero shirt and no hair for the Billy we come to know.
Also, completely off subject. Did you ever see him on the Joe Rogan podcast where he said that he saw a guy shapeshift?
Yeah, he's a wild dude.
That's insane. But also, even Joe Rogan goes, were you on drugs?
Yeah,
and he was like, no, I was actually sober then. And I'm like, interesting.
And I was drinking this tea.
Yeah, right.
He now owns the NWA. He runs a wrestling company. Like, not just
for real.
The rest. Remember, like back in the day when
NWA or NWO?
NWA. Like back, the thing that turned into WCW, where Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes and all of them in the 80s, the National Wrestling Alliance. He now owns that and he operates it. He's the head booker. It's not what it once was, but it's probably maybe the fourth or fifth biggest wrestling company in the country. And he owned part of TNA Impact, and I was on for a while. I think he owned part. I don't know. It's pretty wild. He's a pretty crazy dude.
That's so random.
Yeah. So that's the Billy Corgan part of the story. But so one thing that pops in my mind is when you said when you talk about the yellow tracksuit, obviously Kill Bill was a her outfit, Uma Thurman's The Bride's outfit, and that seemed to be a tribute to Bruce Lee. I think that
100%,
right,
100%.
And there's two directions in going there. One, Quentin Tarantino. Any thoughts on the way Bruce Lee was portrayed in kind of getting his ass kicked by Brad Pitt? And the other thought there was the RZA, along with Wu-Tang, hip hop, martial arts. Was there ever any connection made there between Bruce Lee and hip hop?
Yeah. So
that wasn't really a question, but it was just something to talk about.
Yeah, which is perfect. It's perfect.
Done rambling. Your turn.
As far as Quentin Tarantino thing, well, I thought it was weird that he would do that, where he would be like, I'm gonna like do like a huge like homage to Bruce Lee with like the whole Kill Bill thing, but then later on basically, make him look like an ass.
I don't
Also, I didn't
understand.
even ask, can we curse on this?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Oh, all right. I didn't
Yeah.
know if like trying to like monetize or
No,
we had
no
a
one wants
problem
to give me
with it.
anything.
All right.
It's funny. I walked out of what was the one he Inglorious Bastards? I'm like, and I
Yeah.
enjoyed it, but I'm like, that was World War II fan fiction.
Yeah,
Like,
they shot Hitler into soup. I
right.
I'm not positive that that's what happened.
I don't think it was either. It wasn't. And
And they also shot him in like a theater, like it was like he mixed like the Abe Lincoln story with like Hitler.
right.
Like
And
I
it's
don't know.
one thing to do it to, and no one's really going to give a shit because it's Hitler, and you're like, we just want to see him die, I guess.
Right. Nobody
Which
gave a shit that Hitler got shot. They
fair
were like,
enough. But
hey.
then when he does it, when he's sliding Bruce Lee in his fan fiction, which I know that there's some talk of there being some legitimacy of this story, but I think that movie also was Hollywood fan fiction. It's
Right.
like it did strike a weird way. Like it was an odd choice.
Well, I thought it was weird too, because it's like almost like he just painted like a picture of Bruce Lee being an asshole. And don't get me wrong, I didn't know Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee died like before I think I was even fucking born.
1973. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
where I was
no,
born.
I was born in '86, so it's like like but he was dead before I even discovered who he was when I was a kid.
Yep.
So like obviously like, and even then like I'm definitely no Bruce Lee expert or anything like that, um but I mean, I don't know this for a fact, but I assume like it seems like everybody, when you're in Hollywood long enough, you kind of get an ego, or you kind of,
Yeah.
become an asshole at certain points. Or even then, like, I mean, it, is great of a guy is he was, to me at least visually, or from what I hear or from what I read or whatever. I'm sure he was also an asshole on certain days too. You know what I
They even
mean?
acknowledged that in
Like
the
anybody
30 for
else.
30 too. They said that he had his days where he was, I think anybody who's that intense and that also comfortable in their own skin, I think like
You're not going to walk
it's
around
easy,
kiss. You're not going to walk
right?
around kissing everybody's ass. You know what I
And
mean?
I'm sure it's easy to get frustrated with people who I'm sure you can see in a second if you're someone like him, if there's somebody who's just not ever going to put the effort in. I'm
Or,
sure you
or
can.
even or even then, I also think about it like this too. Like you got to realize what that dude had to overcome.
Right,
Like there was a reason why he tried to do the whole thing in America, and and basically everybody, because he was Asian, they were like, "You're not going to be a lead role." Like at
right,
that point in time, they were like, "Huh." Like even now, Asian people are just starting to get lead roles in movies, in
right,
Indian, in like, and just anybody else. Like
right.
they're all just
Just
starting to
this
get lead
week,
roles in
the
this.
guy, the guy, the kid from Indiana Jones, the Temple of Doom, got nominated for an Oscar, right? I believe for Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Oh, I didn't know he got nominated for
I'm
an Oscar
almost
for that.
positive he did. I don't quote me on that. We will have already known if he won or lost by the time this comes out. But I mean, that's pretty
Right.
wild. I mean, think about. I mean, because he was the same kid from Goonies, I believe, right?
What was it? Data?
I've
Uh,
only ever seen Goonies once, and it was when I
well,
was a
I
kid.
also I always remember him as Short Round.
Right, short. He was Short Round from
Short
Temple of
Round.
Doom, and I think he
Yeah.
was the same kid from Goonies.
Yeah.
And
No, he was the same kid from Goonies.
yeah, and it's
But
just, but those were two very stereotypically Asian portrayals, and it's like
right,
that was in my lifetime, probably at the beginning of your lifetime, and
right.
it took this dude how long to even get another chance to really, I mean, it's not like there's been a ton of Asian actors that have won Oscars between now and then either. I mean,
Right. Well, even like Squid Games just finally, they were the first like I think Korean, or at
yep,
least non-American, to win some, that whatever that big award that they won was. Like I don't know, I
yeah,
don't
I don't
watch
know what
award
it's
shows,
called,
but
but yeah, me
but
either.
but but I know that they won a big award, and that was like a huge deal, because never have like an all Asian cast ever won an award like that. Like, and that was just recently,
Yeah,
just within the last like 3 years. So like
and Parasite too, I guess. There's,
right, Parasite. Also, that movie was sick too.
yeah,
Like Korean horror films are always wicked dope. And my old roommate, Slant Sight from Headshots, he's Korean, and he's the one that would always show me all these like crazy Korean horror films and stuff like that. And I believe he's the one that showed me Battle Royale back in the day, which
I'm
was
not familiar with that.
that it's basically what they took. What are those movies that they made? The ones with like the girl and they put everybody on the island and everybody has to like kill each other and stuff.
I don't know what type of movies you watch.
That was
Snuff films?
no, that was like a big movie that they made, big American movie franchise that they came out with. They came out
Oh,
with three different ones of them.
see, I don't watch a lot of that stuff. Oh, it was like The Purge? No, it wouldn't have been that.
No, it wasn't The Purge. It was like
I think you know. I know. I can picture it in my head now.
yeah,
Yeah,
it
I
was a
haven't seen
chick
it.
with a bow and arrow and stuff like that. Well,
Oh,
long
Hunger
story short,
Games.
Hunger Games, thank
Oh,
you.
okay, yes. All right, I
They
was thinking of
completely
something else.
they
But
stole that entire idea from Battle Royale, which is like an old, like I think that came out in like I think early 80s or something like that. Like that movie's crazy too.
yeah,
But yeah, long story short, that's like it was just amazing what Bruce Lee did at that time frame too, especially like he had to be so badass and so charismatic, and also his movies had to have such a deep meaning that he put into them that like you could not deny, just like just his presence or just how incredible he was.
he had to be so who he was that when people saw, and I don't mean this as a justification of it, that people saw him as almost something other than Asian, because
Right,
he was bigger than that, and it's like that. And
right.
I'm just saying that to point out that's what he needed to do in order to be accepted in the level that he was at. And it's like, and we're thinking of him now, 50 years. I mean, this would be 50 years this July. It was when he passed away.
Right. That's what I was gonna say. It's about to be his
Yeah,
50th anniversary. Like that's crazy.
yeah, and it's just it's pretty insane. I
Yeah.
mean,
And the fact that he still, like, to me, like that's another impressive thing. The fact that he conquered all that back then and he's still revered, like people still
right.
talk about him. He's still like one of those, like such an inspirational thing for even like especially in the martial arts world, you know what I mean? There's never been a dude in the UFC that wasn't like, like, oh, I
Oh
watched
yeah.
Bruce Lee movies when I was a kid, you know what I mean? And I was like, wow, I want to get into martial arts, much like I did, and much like how anybody else that got into martial arts, like
And they
it,
stand the test of time because
that's what I mean, for the
yeah,
fact that that was that long ago and people still growing up, like, kids that are younger than me that are in the like UFC or, other MMA organizations are still like, everybody grew up watching, Bruce Lee movies and was just like, whoa, you know what I mean? So impressed. And
there's when you watch an old Bruce Lee movie, because obviously now they're all old.
right.
Like it's not like when you're watching like football from the 60s and you have dudes out there with leather helmets that are going at 1/3 the speed that they're going now. I mean, it's not like watching that compared to modern football. He's Bruce Lee is still moving at a speed that is pretty unbelievable.
Well, and it's funny too about like that you mentioned that too, because his speed, because all of his movies, he used to move so fast, like he moves so fast that the cameras back then were just so shitty that they
Right.
couldn't catch it, and so you weren't catching all the moves that he was doing, and so they actually had to slow down the film, and he was
Yeah.
still fast. Like even all the movies that you see, all of his fight scenes are all actually slowed down, and
Yeah.
he's still moving at remarkable speed. And so like anybody also that knows anything about physics, like speed is the thing that makes something powerful. So it's like you don't even have to be a big guy. If you could throw a
Right.
fast punch with a little bit of power behind it, it's the faster you throw a punch, the velocity, the speed in it is what makes something powerful. It's the reason why a bullet's deadly. I could throw a bullet at you and it's
Right.
ouch, but if it comes out of a gun, it's because it's going so fast is what kills you.
Yes. Yes.
So
Yeah. So what about the Wu-Tang of it all? Did you ever
and
because it's funny, I know there's a lot of kung fu and martial arts samples in Wu-Tang. I can't think of him ever actually doing Bruce Lee, but I'm betting probably that's just a pretty legally trippy area to just put in.
right. And I know that they probably had to clear a lot of samples for stuff back then, and obviously using the old Shaolin, like because I do remember that when I was really little, my at my grandmother's house, she had one of the TVs that you could only it only had like 8 channels or something on it.
Yeah.
So and it had like a
That's what
twist
I
thing
had,
where you
bro.
could
That's
go,
what I had until I was like 20.
you know what I mean? Yeah, like and like I remember that, and like it only had like 8 channels on it, and I always remember on channel 2 they would always have kung fu movies playing on like Saturday mornings and stuff. So me and my older brothers would get up and we'd sit there and eat bowls of cereal and watch old kung fu movies. And like it's very ironic that like growing up, and then one of my best friends, Mark, growing up, his older brother was obsessed with Wu-Tang, and he had Wu-Tang posters all of his wall, and he would only just basically only strictly listen to Wu-Tang. And like I remember like at that time too being very influenced by martial arts and being influenced by Bruce Lee movies, which got me into martial arts. And then that's when I also started discovering, hip hop. And through my older brothers, and whatever they were playing is basically what I had listening to. And same thing, like going over my friends' houses, whatever their older brothers were bumping, that's what we were listening to, and we'd be like, oh, who's this, And I remember my best friend Mark growing up, his older brother was obsessed with Wu-Tang. And I remember going and listening to it and then hearing all the kung fu samples and everything. And like, remember like kind of connecting the dots and being like, whoa, those are like the stuff that I, have seen and, seen at on channel 2 at, on Saturday morning.
It's
And
pretty
so like
wild that like
so I
before
always thought
like
that was just super dope, because combining, like the whole martial arts world that I was obsessed with, and then starting to get into, finding things that I liked, you know what I mean, and which end up being hip hop, and then finding something that combined both the things that I already loved. And it's like the martial arts world with the hip hop, and like, and especially with like the dirty production and everything like that. Like I thought RZA was a genius for that, and then all of a sudden I became obsessed with Wu-Tang because of that.
right.
You
And
know,
Wu-Tang had that way of they made beats that were slightly off, original beats that would be slightly off. And it had a way of making it seem deceptively simple, because you're like, well, the it isn't completely off on beat, and like the sample sounds super dusty. I can do that, but it's not that easy. Like,
no, and it's not. But also, that's one of the things that inspired me to want to start to do that, because I would hear, you know, those type of beats, and I was like, oh man, like how do they do that? You know what I mean?
yeah,
And this is obviously pre-internet era, so like the internet didn't exist. I couldn't just look up a tutorial on how do I do that, so like a lot of the times, like, and anybody I knew like that had a setup, it was the same thing, as far as their home studio, basically pretty much what Riz was working with, using beat machines and everything like that. And
yeah.
not knowing how to what quantize was or anything back then. And so he would make beats, and I'm sure they were slightly off time, and I'm sure he would like kind of even warp the sound and try to change it so it wasn't a direct. It was probably a good way for him to get around
Yeah,
sample
samples.
clearances back
Yeah,
then too, of especially him being in the record industry young. So
yeah,
like especially him producing pretty much everybody from Wu-Tang all their original stuff, and making beats for whole albums for everybody in your crew. Like just that amount of work that goes into that, like people don't realize the amount of work that goes
oh,
into
yeah.
working on a project, especially working on that many, especially that many people in your group, like what I mean, that many members in a group, and making full albums and multiple albums for everybody
Right.
until you guys get big enough that everybody gets their own individual deals. Like the way he thought of Wu-Tang just was genius.
That was also at a time too. Can you imagine how hard it would be to make hip hop off on tape? Like, and I started on a 4-track, and even that's damn hard to work with. Tape is not very forgiving, and it
Bro,
just
the
doesn't.
the first beats that I ever made were like, I realized this too, even I think to this day, just because of how I learned how to make beats. I still think sometimes I do it the hardest way you could possibly do it.
Yeah, I do
Like,
that a
and
lot
I
a little bit too.
and I don't know if it's just like I like the challenge, or if it's just like my brain only works like that because I grew up in an era that this is how you do things, and I only learned how to do things in certain ways. And even meeting a lot more people, and then them watching their techniques and watching how they do stuff, I'm like, wow, the way they do things is way easier than the way I'm doing it. Like, because
Yeah,
I remember back in the day, I had a tape player that had the 2 tapes. So I used to tape like a part of a sample onto that tape. And then I would my brother's best friend worked at Quincy Records and Tapes. And he, like, I would get basically like drum breaks from Europe and stuff like that, and beat break like tapes.
Yeah.
And I would take the drums from that and try to tape them over the sample that I made and try to make my own beats, which was pretty much the same thing. It was like slightly off timing because I didn't hit them
Yeah.
exact same
Like
time. So
pause tapes to some. It's just.
it became like a skill for me to be able to make a beat by pressing a tape at the same time, and like
Yeah.
even trying to press it a second early, knowing it's going to take a second for the tape to click
Right.
on and everything. And then even after that, like I used to make all my beats on Adobe. Like that was like the first things that like any of
Like
my
Audition.
yeah, Adobe
Yeah.
Audition, where all my friends would, that's how they all recorded all their vocals on. But we would put the beat on that and then record the vocals to that. But then I was like, well, that's already in, like, it was the first DAW I ever used. And so it was the first time that I was like, oh, I could just take a part of like a song that I already like, or an old,
Yeah.
record or something like that. I would take that, chop the sample, and then I would chop that up a bunch. But I didn't have a beat machine or anything like that, no equipment. So I was just sitting there and tediously chopping things. And then I would take from same thing that I would do with the tape player, take old break beats and chop those up and make the beat like that. But when I was showing people the beats I was making, actually even some of the beats that I gave you forever ago that you've actually recorded to, I made the beats like that.
Oh, word.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of do you remember the free association beat that I made?
Yeah. The one
Like
where I'm like, I'm sipping on vodka mixed with jeans. When I'm in a jean, when I'm rocking jeans in a tee, it's like I'm sipping on vodka mixed with Genius tea. I think that was my
yeah,
line on that.
yeah. Because I remember I had you do a verse to it. I'm like, I had a whole plan where I was gonna try to RZA it. I
Yeah.
was gonna secretly get you to record. I got Illusionist. I got Dave to record a verse. I think I got somebody else to record a verse, and then I had a verse, and then I chopped them all together. But I
Oh,
also realized back then nobody knew how to count bars,
no, they
so it was
didn't.
very much Wu-Tang style, where this dude had 8 bars, this dude had a 16, this dude had a 24, this dude had a 36. Like it was all over the place.
Yeah.
But it was
That
also,
actually that allowed leading me to confess my biggest hip hop embarrassment. I hadn't thought about this in a while. Remember that track we did back in the day that was supposed to be like a triumph that was all like it was like everybody from Project Mayhem, and I don't know if it was over the exact triumph beat or it was something that
it wasn't Holbrook made that
right, he
beat.
made something that, but that was the idea of it. And everybody was gonna get on it and they were gonna flip the first line
The first
of
4 to 8 bars of Triumph.
right. And so I
Each
got
member.
on, and for some reason, I don't know what I was on when I got that, but I spaced out in the assignment. And I didn't realize that you guys were saying when you said flip, I was like, oh, I'm gonna take it and I'm gonna redo some basic ideas and put things in it. I didn't realize you guys were actually taking the bars and starting with them.
No, I didn't either. I think Oblivious had a verse. He flipped pretty much all of Ghostface's entire verse. He
Okay.
took it and then flipped like every word, where there was some beginning of the lines that were his, but then he flipped the ending of them. And
Okay.
same thing. I only flipped, I think, the first four bars of my verse. I think I had You God's verse. And
Okay, maybe I think I had RZA, so maybe I
oh
didn't
wait,
do it
no,
wrong.
I think maybe I had inspected decks. I honestly can't, that was so long ago. I can't remember off the top of my head, but
Because I
I
felt
do
bad about that forever because the song never. I was the last verse to get recorded, and there should have been 4 or 5 more people after that. And I had always thought that I messed that up, and then people just got sick of it, and didn't want to finish it. So maybe I just am carrying this
no, no,
guilt
no,
that I
no,
shouldn't
no,
have.
no. It was also just like that test of like I honestly have no idea how RZA got actually everybody on board and convinced them that all this was gonna work.
Oh yeah, I just read this book. I just finished it the other day, the new Rick One book, and the memoir. It's really good. You guys go know too. But he talks a
Yeah,
lot about that. How just it's like he both was super frustrated with the fact that they couldn't get on the same page. But then when he tried to get his own shit going with like Ice Water and he had an American Cream Team, he was like, "Oh, I get it. It's impossible to get people to do anything. Like
yeah.
it's
Well, like especially like even with like you know, even with starving artists and stuff like that, like it was so hard to get everybody on the same page and everything like that. And also, I also think it was different. It was a different time because that was just the very, very beginning of streaming services, or maybe just before
Right.
that. So like pretty much the only outlet that you had is like any service like that was like iTunes or like Apple Music before it
Right.
was like Apple
It was
Music,
all like
iTunes.
CDRs with shitty like pamphlets and like, you
Right.
know, assembling them yourselves and stuff.
Right. And so like everything that we were doing was kind of like pressing it up. Like I remember like we got like a small deal with a distribution company, like pressing up our own stuff. And even that, it was just like it was so hard to keep all of that moving, you know what I mean? Keep everybody on the same page, especially because, you know, it's hard to get what like two people to agree on anything.
Right.
Like even me and Onest, like with like Dirty City Records, we formed that. It's really like almost like I consider that like a gangstar like foundation type of thing where it's like Dirty City Records is the name of the group, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
where like I'm the DJ and the producer, the engineer, you know, and he's the artist. So it's like, you know, together we're like a duo, you know,
Yep.
and we put out everything together. But also it's way different now, and it, like, you know, with all the streaming services and everything, it's like you have way more outlets to get your stuff out there now.
Yeah.
And even then it's, you know, me and him, you know, we'll have different opinions on things of, you know, like I think we should do it this way, I think we should do it that way, I think we should do this with the song, I think we should go this direction, you know, I think
Yeah.
that you should write about this concept or whatever, you know. But me
Yeah.
and him are really good at finding a good happy medium where he's happy with what he wants and I'm happy with what I want. And I think that's the reason why we've been consistently, you know, being able to put stuff out. And even then, like I'm sitting on a treasure trove of music with me and him, you know,
Yeah.
which even then, unfortunately, like even just with like his medical stuff that happened recently, you know, like it definitely pumped the brakes on it. And even then, like with my medical stuff that happened recently, you know, like it
Yeah.
definitely like it happened at the same time, which is ironic because, you know, we both kind of had to, you know, put the brakes on for that.
Yeah.
But we're also both sitting on a shit ton of music, so that, you know, we're getting ready to release. So even then, as you know, he gets better, and even then, he came to the studio and he banged out a solo song, and then we recorded another feature with another artist, the Supervisor, that's going to be coming out soon too. So,
Sweet.
um, yeah. So like even that was the first two songs that I recorded because I remember you were asking about, you know, how he was doing and stuff,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so
I'm
you
glad
know,
I'm glad he's on the mend.
we got
Selling
some,
some
we
pretty
got some
scary
stuff in the
stuff.
works as well. So
Yep. Yep. I got some other stuff that I'll be sending you to, and can't stop, won't stop. Probably should stop, but I'm not going to.
yeah, no, honestly, I like I said, I couldn't even at this point. It's just like
Yeah.
and I think that that's another thing from like Bruce Lee, you know, like just his pure determination with things where like when everybody in the world is telling you you can't do it, and like truly with him, you know, truly
Yeah.
the entire world was like, this will never happen for you. This
Right.
will never work. You like this will never happen. And he was like, no,
Nah.
fuck you, I'm gonna do
Yeah.
it. and
Hold on.
and
I'm gonna
guess
let my
what he
cat
did?
in. Hold on one second. My cat's
Yeah.
losing her mind. What's up, bud? Here she comes. All right. Problem solved.
But yeah, with that, like keeping that in mind, that's another thing that I find just super inspiring from him, where, you know, when the entire world is telling you, what's up, cat?
It's Chloe.
What's up, Chloe? Yeah, even with that, you know, when the whole world is telling you no, it's usually like a good sign when everybody's telling you no, don't do that. Like, I mean, as long
Right.
as it's not hurting anybody else, you know what I mean, and it's a productive thing. Usually those are like the great success stories when somebody's like, don't do that, and everybody's like, quit, you know, go do something regular, you know what I mean? And it's like my entire life, I've truly always believed I was never meant to do anything like normal or what they said that I should do. Like
Right.
I just always kind of trusted my gut and went with the things that made me happy and, you know, the things that inspired me. And that is a huge like inspiration from Bruce Lee and just the way he thought about things for
Right.
sure.
I mean, I can relate to that as well. It's like you know, I often realize that I could have made a lot different decisions that could have made my life a lot probably easier in a lot of ways, but it
Right.
wasn't worth it. I hate when I look around and see some of my peers and realize they haven't emotionally matured in 15,
Right.
20 years. And
Or even then, just like sacrificing your like not even like integrity, I guess. It's just like sacrificing your joys, you know what I mean?
right,
Like to appease like the rest of what you think society wants you to do, you know what I mean? Everybody's like, you're supposed to, go to school, then graduate, then go do this and go do that. It's like, but also, why can't I also like the things I like and do the things I want to do?
yeah,
Like you can even still do all those things, you know what I mean? But you could also still do the things that you want to do and the things that make you happy, whether it's art, music, both, like martial arts. Like you can still do all those things. And nowadays there is even so many outlets that you could do where you can even make money off of the things that you love to do, more
right.
so than you'd make at your real job.
In my town of 5,000 people, there's one place you can go to learn how to be a falconer. There's another place you can go to learn how to fence. And it's like it's like I feel like those. I grew up in a town twice that size, and I didn't have either of those options.
Yeah, right. Like, and like honestly, learning how to fence would be dope.
Yeah, I keep thinking about doing it.
You
But
know, why honestly, why not? And to me, it's like also like I always think that like another thing, like I'd always like my mom always told me too, she'd always like, she's like a huge person that's always believed in me and always kind of backed me. And like I'm super thankful for that, to have somebody that's like super um, you know, willing to back the things that you want to do
right,
that everybody else is also saying that's like crazy, you know what I mean? Don't do that, you know what I mean? Like, or there's no money in it, or blah blah blah, whatever the case may be. Like it was great to have my mom always support me in all those things, and always have somebody like have your back with that sort of thing.
yeah, it becomes important to realize if you do anything artistic that you can't seek validation from everybody because you need to actually know the people whose validation means something and whose advice means something because you are going to get a lot of people who just they'll take their own insecurities out in your dream. And
Right.
it's it's they don't even do it intentionally, but
Right.
there if you have a few people whose trust you whose opinion you really trust, you're really lucky because I think a lot of people they let their insecurities lead who they ask advice for, and they'll ask advice from somebody who they kind of know is going to tell them if you think, well, I'm not pretty enough to do this, or you think I'm not talented enough to do this, oftentimes you'll seek somebody out who's going to tell you just that.
Right, because
And
that's what you want to hear.
right, and it's the easier thing to hear. And
Yeah,
you know,
everybody wants to hear that you're great, you know what I mean? Nobody, like, when I'm making a song, like, um like I would rather have somebody be like, nah, bro, that ain't it, you know what I mean? I'd
yeah,
rather have somebody tell me that. But also on the other side of that too, I always I heard, I forget who told me, but somebody, I was having a conversation with somebody one time, and like I don't remember exactly who told me, but I'll never forget. They told me, they were like, do you like ska music? And I was like, I've seen a lot of ska bands. Like, to me, it's not like my old roommate, Johnny Quest. He
yeah,
was obsessed with ska bands and stuff. I've seen a shit ton of ska bands, and even then, it's not my tip, like particular type of music. Like I wouldn't like go out of my way to listen to it. But he told me, like, I forget who I was talking to, but he goes, do you like ska? And I was like, not really. Like, I mean, like, I mean, it's not bad. Like, I mean, it's not something I would particularly seek out. But he goes, when you've been, like, and then I told him, I was like, but I've been to a ton of shows and stuff. And he goes, are they sold out? I'm like, they're packed, like to the max. You know what I mean? Like kids, like,
yeah,
skanking all around the room, bumping into each other. Place was packed. And he was like, yeah, so that means somebody out there likes it.
yeah.
Just because you don't like it doesn't mean there's not a market for it. Doesn't mean that there's not somebody out there that, you know, there's something. Like, I mean, and at that point, the story ended with, he goes, hey, even there's people on the internet that love their balls stomped on by stilettos. You know what I mean? So there's something out there for everybody, just
Well, it's
because
funny.
you don't like it doesn't mean there's not an entire group of people that are super into it. You know what I
Right,
mean? Like furries or whatever the hell it is. You know what I mean? There's something out there for everybody. As much as if you don't like it, doesn't mean somebody else isn't.
right.
And there's a huge market for it. People buy into it. So
And I think too the context is really important because I remember I don't know a lot about mumble rap really, but I remember I'd hear artists like Lil Peep, whatever, and I'm like, I put on a song too. It's like, I'm like, I don't get this. But then
And even then,
I watched a
Little Peep wasn't
documentary
even really
about him.
mumble rap. He was like emo
Oh
rap.
yeah, okay, yeah. I see. I don't
Yeah,
even know the thing. But he passed away, didn't he?
yeah, he did.
All right.
He
And
did.
so I watched a documentary about him, and obviously it's more about the person. And then I still don't really get in the music. But then when they actually start showing people in the venue, the context of it made it more sense. You can actually see not only the act performing, but the people how they're interacting with it.
Well,
That for
because of
me kind of brought it all together.
how the art affected the people.
Right.
Because and even then, I realized that too. Like, artists are usually like, I mean, and not usually, always your own worst critic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there's been so many songs that like I've recorded with other people, and they were like, like I made the beat, and like, we recorded the song, and I like, I, I I know what's good, you know what I mean? Or at least to my ear, or I know that there's somebody out there that is this is going to affect them in that way that you
Right.
wanted to. And even then, they're usually the people that are like, I don't know, like I don't know if I ever want to put it out, or I don't know
Right.
if I like it or whatever, because you're your own worst critic. And I realized that too. So like I forget what I heard it on, but somebody was like, also when you make art, it's as much as like every artist is like, oh, I'm doing this for me. I do this for me. I don't care if I ever make a dollar off of it. It's like, yeah, that much can be true. But also, if you are making art and you are putting it out there, it's not just for you anymore.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like once you put it out there, it isn't for you anymore. It's for whoever like it's going to. And then they decide what they feel about it,
And
not
it's
you.
real tricky to make music for an audience because for people who are looking for new music, what they're sort of looking for is something that reminds them of all the music that they grew up with that they love that also sounds completely new and different. And it's
Right.
like
Which is
it's
pretty fucking hard to do. And I
right.
know that from somebody that's, and one thing I pride myself on, especially as a producer, is I started really trying to go outside the box because, making music with my friends growing up, they all, want to make like boom bap and, like
Yeah.
Wu-Tang sound and shit. And, like the shit, like you said, the shit that we grew up on. It's like, I wanted to be the stuff that we grew up in, we were influenced by and what we like, but also want it to be yours and
Right.
do your thing with it, so that would
Gotcha. Gotcha. Great.
that's always a hard balance to make with any artist that I've ever worked with, is like
Right. Because especially the
trying to
boom bap stuff.
trying to make something new, something that sounds original, but also, like you said, something that also is nostalgic in the things that you like and the things that you grew up loving.
Right.
So
I
it's hard
remember
to find that balance.
there was definitely a time in hip hop where the underground scene was like, yo, we taking it back to 94. We taking it back to that Black Sheep. We taking it back to that whatever. And like
Right.
the problem is, well, there's still tons of those tapes in that album I've never listened to. I mean, it's like, all the big ones I have, but it's like there's still original music like that to delve into. I don't need you doing an impression of that. It's just it it was something that I never really got. It's like, oh, I'm a nostalgia act,
Right.
but it's like it's for someone else's nostalgia.
Well, I think that's why dudes like Little Peep and stuff like that, like almost like not creating like his own genre of music, but like like taking the things that he liked from like the rock world or the
Yeah.
grunge, or you know what I mean, like Nirvana or anything that like he was inspired by, but then mixing that with like hip hop, but then also it's not just like boom bap stuff, because obviously he was younger than than we are, and so he didn't grow up with the shit that we grew up with. He grew
Right.
up with you know
He
the
grew up thinking in Nirvana the way we probably thought of the Doors.
right,
And it's
exactly,
funny
like
too that like I remember a lot of people have said, well, if Nirvana was so good, you don't hear the influence. But that's kind of bullshit because the influence is kind of comes down to a lot of people like these people that are like it doesn't the influence in Nirvana doesn't sound like Nirvana. I remember Dr. Dre was liquidating his entire collection of vinyl at some point, and they asked him, I think, the few records he held on to, and one of them was Bleached by Nirvana, which is like a pretty crazy record to associate with Dr. Dre. But that
right.
record has it's like that record inspired Nirvana inspired people the way the Sex People Sex Pistols did. Not to go and create a band that sounded like the Sex Pistols and Nirvana, but to create something that sounded like the things that sat around them that they could use. For people that were sort of broke and had a certain amount of whatever and could figure out how to scrap enough money together to get the basic small level of their dream going in order to take it from there. That's where the inspiration sort of comes from. And then to some degree, a lot of this modern hip hop, they bring in some of the sounds a little more, but they inspire, and Nirvana's inspired in so many different ways.
Oh, 100%. And like, even like, I don't know, even to go back like to the Bruce Lee thing, it's almost like an era. It's like almost like a point in time. You know what I mean? That it's like, you know, to have something inspiring at that point in time, to leave a mark, like even Nirvana, you know, like he also died at a very early age, you know what I mean? And before he got to see, like, don't get me wrong, he got to see the height of his career and realize how big he was, but also, like, I mean, I bet you he didn't even realize how big that they would ever be. You know what I mean? Even especially after he died, to die at you know, the peak of your fame. And then, you know, like, because then at that point, then there's a marker on it where it's like, this was a point in time where this was so original and so new. And just at that point, you could, like, almost people could be like, I want to copy that. You know what I mean? Well, because it was so influential. It's like, oh, I
think of it like
do what they did.
Pearl Jam was the band that everybody copied because we were subjected to years of like Stained and Creeds and all these people who were very clearly mimicking, you know, Eddie Vedder and the feeling of Pearl Jam. But those bands, I mean, to me, I never was into, you know, and I don't know if those particular bands, those are the ones that the easiest to throw under the bus, but that sound was beaten to the ground. But the Nirvana sound still is as fresh as ever.
Well, because also I think that they came from that like underground scene. You know what I mean? They came from like that underground grunge, like, you know, like there was a very small like niche for that sort of thing, you know, like as far as like even how like underground hip hop was for a little while, you know what I mean? Like until like there was almost like a clear like defining line between underground and mainstream back then. You know,
just think about too, like with Nirvana, Bikini Kill, Kathleen Hanna, she's the one who came up with the title for Smells Like Teen Spirit. They were an enormous influence. So obviously her and Kurt Cobain were friends enough to be in the same bedroom hanging out. She married one of the Beastie Boys. And then obviously Courtney Love is around that same group. This is a pretty like small knit group of people.
Right. Like I was saying, I was like, there was a very small like group of people within that time frame. And like, so I always go back to like thinking of shows, because back then there wasn't any streaming services or anything like that. Like if you want to find out about something, you know, you weren't like looking on like Release Radar for some shit. You
have to like call Strawberries and ask the guy to check the list on when the new like Teenage Fan Club album is coming out. That was just
or even then, most importantly, you had to go to the fucking show.
Yeah,
you had to actually go to the show. And even then, like out of like, you know, how many bands performed that night, you know, you saw that one band that you're like, those motherfuckers, those dudes are dope. You know, and for whatever reason. And I'm sure Nirvana was one of those bands that, you know, like out of all the, you know, little grunge shows that they would play, you know, and in Seattle at that time, you know,
they're the ones that
probably
people got
with that brewing at that time, like that sound and that emotion and, you know, all of that stuff brewing at that moment in time. I'm sure that out of all the other bands, there's probably a lot of really other good bands that were, you know, similar at that time.
I mean, there's like there's the Mudhoney's, there's you know, I want to say Citizen Dick, but that was a fake band from Singles, so I don't think they were.
But no, but like you know, it just so happened to be that was the one band that, you know, out of that scene at that time and that genre and that niche, like that, you know, somebody saw them and goes, they got something there, and they got, you know, signed or whatever, and they got pushed and pushed out of, you know, that underground scene. They broke through and was able to.
And you can also, this is part of it, you could go, well, anybody given the right circumstances could do whatever. But I think, and I'm not a huge Foo Fighters fan, I often describe them as the Old Navy of music, but there's something to be said about how successful Dave Grohl, I call him David, like Dave Grohl.
Grohl. Oh, good. Dude, you know David personally, right?
Yes. You know, I call him Dave, but
I call him David. He prefers
more formal. But there is something to be said about his level of success, to the point that Nirvana doesn't get talked about. When people say Dave Grohl, they don't think of Nirvana anymore. I mean,
well, also because he was so young at the time when he was in the band too, like
right.
And also, like, obviously him having a very successful career after that with the Foo Fighters,
Right.
um, is like,
But there was
yeah,
no accident. Like his
nobody
level
goes
of
back and they're
talent was
like,
like
so
undeniable.
Nirvana,
Yeah.
and like nobody's like, oh well, Foo Fighters sounds like Nirvana. You know what I mean? Even
Right.
then he had to change his whole sound of like he wasn't going to try to copy what Nirvana was supposed to be, or else I'm sure Foo Fighters would have not have been as half as successful if
Right.
they just tried to copy what Nirvana was doing.
Right. Yeah, it definitely. I remember when the that Foo Fighters album came out. I remember reading a review up at the first one, and they back then they were really looking for evidence that he was either talking about Kurt Cobain or that Kurt Cobain had written the music or something. And they said the only thing on that album that in any way was related to Kurt Cobain is that when you open the cover points right at your face and there's a gun on the cover. And I thought that was both kind of creative, but also a little tacky to say that. But
yeah,
you know,
and guess what? I'm sure he wasn't the one that came up with that idea. I'm sure somebody else did within a record label, and he basically just had to sign off on it and be like,
right.
yeah,
And
sure.
it was also, I think, like a laser. And I think the idea was probably tied to the Foo Fighters, like UFO sort of thing. I'm guessing. I mean, if I had to make a guess why it was out there, but
Right. Yeah, I was gonna say with Foo Fighters, how they got their name is that's what they called like UFOs that like the
yeah,
fighter pilots would see. And like I think it was like World War I or II.
yeah. I remember when they came out. I think maybe the first song they released, or one of them, was on like an X-Files soundtrack, and it was almost a novelty that the guy from Nirvana was given another shot. And especially because the other guys, Chris Novacek, I mean, he really did very little after that. He had one band that I don't think. I mean, I think he took his life in a different direction. Maybe it was more about activism or something. But
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
they
And
stood the
well,
test of
and I was
time.
gonna say that I'm like, think about that. Like out of like there was only 3 members of the band,
Yeah,
and one of them is dead. The other one wasn't anywhere near as successful or
yeah,
went off in a different direction, and then the other one took that moment and ran with it, but also made it into something way bigger
right.
than I'm sure he ever thought it would be.
Oh God, yeah. It's crazy to see them sell out like Fenway for multiple days in a row.
Right, like which is crazy to be able to sell out like a stadium like that like multiple days in a row.
Yeah,
Like that's impressive.
it is. It'll be our turn soon enough.
Soon enough, baby.
So, any closing thoughts you want to touch on related to Bruce Lee or anything else, or you know, anything else you're working on?
Like I said, I'm working on a ton of music right now. I honestly, my biggest thing right now is just been trying to stay steady with the production, especially like with like I just had a bunch of like medical stuff happen, stuff like that, and need to get surgeries and stuff like that. So even then, like it was kind of like a blessing in disguise, as as much as I'm broke as hell at the moment. I made a ton of music. I've been making a ton of beats and really just kind of like just really getting out of my comfort zone really too. I've been trying a lot of different things that I normally wouldn't do just out of pure just see what I can do. Like I said too, my biggest thing is I want to be able to get to the point where I can walk into studio with any artist and be able to work with any artist. No matter what their genre, what their vibe
Yeah,
is, like whatever, or even then, like, and also I'm just also kind of mixing genres and stuff like that, like we were talking about earlier too, where it's like that's really the only way to really start to really come up with something original is to
right.
now mix stuff that you'd never think would be mixed together and seeing what you come up with.
More so now than ever, you're not going to get successful sounding like the next guy. I mean, that was because
Right.
that was the thing back in the day. Is like we have one Britney Spears, let's find 10 other teenage girls that could be a Britney Spears. We have one Beatles, it's fine the Teetles and the Trudels and the Trottles, and like
Right,
eventually
right.
someone's going to catch them at a state fair and they're going to be huge. And that doesn't work that way anymore. You have to be providing something kind of different because tastes change so quickly. I mean,
Right.
even like you think about like a movie like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, That's a movie that if that came out when we were kids, people would talk about it for 10 years. It would have been like, even like Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs, people talked about for like 10 years. And it's like a lot of these even huge movies everybody loves, they're just forgotten about almost instantly.
Right. Well, and I was gonna say it's harder to make something classic now.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like I think about even like something like a Nas, like an Illmatic or something like that. It's like it would be nearly impossible, even if somebody came up with that now, even if there was a young Nas coming out now and you know, with just like, you know, crazy dope production from an upcoming producer that, you know, like, you know, somebody like myself or something, you know, that like, you know, was you know, doing things that were just like, you know, sounded different for its time. Like it's so easy to fly under the radar now that, you know, it's hard to find something that's actually gonna catch on or get pushed. And it's like, I think there's like a good, like there almost has to be a balance between both where it's like it has to be pushed enough to catch on. You know what I mean? If that makes
the
sense.
dynamic's so much different too, because back then you needed either have enough money or have somebody put up money for you to record. But now all of us can record full songs on our iPhone. So it's like there's anybody can record a song now.
Well, the biggest thing it's too, it's like I could make, you know, I could make an EP literally tonight. I could sit here, I could make 6 beats. I could have an artist come in, record 6 songs. I could mix it, master it, and have it on DistroKid and on streaming services by tomorrow.
By sunup.
You know, you know what I mean? Like if need be, where it's like, so the amount of like, and also the amount of, you know, all right, like you were saying earlier too, like when you went to a hip hop show back in the day, like even if we were opening up for a huge artist, like there would be a bunch of people that would be going, we'd all be going to see that big artist, and there'd be a lot of people in the crowd that would go see the artist, but there would be a good percentage of the crowd that would be from the opening acts of whoever they sold tickets to or whoever they brought or whatever, you know, that would be, you know, I want to say 60, at least 50% of the crowd, at least 50% of the crowd would be the opening acts' friends, you know.
You could pick them out because they were the ones that didn't look like they belonged in a hip hop show. A lot of them were.
Or even then, you would notice that if their friend, by the time their friend got off stage, half of them would go outside to smoke. By the time the next person would be going on, there wouldn't be somebody watching that next set, you know, like.
Or if we're competing with like a playoff game that everybody that like only the people that like hardcore hip hop fans didn't care, but their friends did. You could tell that sometimes. You're like, oh,
right. Which you could tell there would be certain friends of theirs that would be like, no, I'm actually into, you know, seeing the next up and coming guy or whatever. You know what I mean? They wanted to see who was the opening act and, you know, like the opening acts and see who else was up next, you know. And I think even with like we were talking about with like even like you know, the grunge shows back in the day, I'm sure there wasn't like everybody in the crowd was like, oh, I'm also in a grunge band. You know what I mean? Like
and so I think with music
there's a huge difference, you know, when they're half of the crowd is also an artist. They don't give a shit as much, and then the people that do give a shit 10 times more than the people that don't care at all. You know,
because it doesn't cost anything to be a rapper. Because if you want to claim you're a guitarist, you at least have to buy a guitar. But if you want to call yourself a rapper, all you have to do is make 2 words rhyme. And so it's a lot easier. People call themselves rappers when it's like if you were to spend $300 to buy a microphone to claim you're a rapper, there'd be a lot of people out there not claiming that they're rappers.
Right. And even then, nowadays you can be a rapper and all you need is a laptop.
Right.
Or you know, and even then, like I think there's a lot like I think there's a lot. I don't want to say there's fewer DJs. There's probably like it's probably more DJs now, but not in the traditional sense. You know what I mean? Like
not like when you see like a DJ Slipwax up there, just
that can cut and everything like that. There's a lot of DJs that are just making like just house music and things like that. You know, so
but have software that already lines up the beats, and it's like
right. And so like, you know, you're just kind of picking sounds and throwing them together. But like, I don't think there's also like, I think there's probably more producers than there was back then because there's so many more DAWs that you can use. There's so many more like, I don't, there's just so many places like even nowadays, sometimes like when I look for a sample or something like that, sometimes I just go on YouTube and I'll just, you know, scour the internet until I find something dope. I'll download that from YouTube, and then I'll sample that and chop that up.
Yeah,
and
to
make
some
a beat.
degree, making beats now almost feels like a video game. Like there's been a sort of a gamification to it, where it's like it's almost like playing sideways Tetris, where you're to some degree you're moving blocks around to fit them into the right sequence. And I think that's something that the simplicity now. I mean, it's obviously the tools are simple, but it's no easier to like make a great song. You still have to have the ear and things like that. But it's a soothing and enjoyable process for a lot of people to do, unless you're a real artist, and then it's torturous because you can't get the snare to sound perfect, you know.
Right. With me, that's something that kind of it took me a long time to kind of learn how to balance that, where like I'm definitely kind of a perfectionist in that sense, where you know, like I'll definitely when I make a mix of something, like I used to make like 30 mixes of something, where I would have like 30 different versions of the same track or whatever. And, you know, every time like I'd listen to it on the computer, I'd listen to it like, I mean, through the monitors, and then I would listen to it through headphones. Then I'd listen to it in my phone. And then we'd always do the car test. We'd always hop in the car, take a blunt cruise, drive around, listen to the mix, and then be like, okay, this needs to get turned down. That needs to get turned up. You know, the beat needs to be higher, whatever the case may be for the mix. And that's something that I learned from years of, also from just years of like mixing songs and things like that too, where I've just learned to like I also realized my mixes used to be garbage. Only honestly only until like I want to say like a few years ago. Like my like I know my beats were always there. I'd always be like, even when I first started making beats, like I didn't have my own equipment and I didn't have my own laptop. I was poor as shit. And so like anytime I would ever make something, it was only when one of my other friends that had equipment would invite, you know, they would invite me over. I'd come over, you know, we'd smoke or whatever. And then, we'd I was always a kid that was really good at finding samples. I feel like I have a really good ear for it, always have. And like I'll hear a song and be like, ooh, chop that, like I could chop that part and chop that part and chop that part, and I can make a whole thing out of that. And I would my brain just always worked like that. And so a lot of my friends would invite me over, and I feel like they would just have me pick samples. And even then I didn't know how to use like any of like the MPCs or anything like that. So I would have them, I would be like, take this part, take this part, take that part, do this. I would kind of be like almost like a P Diddy, almost like, you know, where everybody's like,
shoulder,
everybody's just like, oh, he's incredible. It's like he doesn't actually do anything, like nothing, no actual
he's
part
the
of
ear
it.
in the room, he's the driving
Right.
force.
Yeah, like he's just more of an executive producer. He hears what he knows would sound good and tells you to do that. And that's basically all I knew how to do at the time, because I didn't know how to program or do anything. I didn't have any of my own equipment. So I used to just get called over to like basically pick samples and stuff like that and have them program it. And then I would sit there with them and be like, no, play this part, part, do this, put the drums here, like, you know, things like that. And so like that's kind of how I started, and just being able to like pick samples and stuff. But nowadays there's just like, you know, like every artist, I mean every producer sells like um drum kits and stuff like that now. So like it's just so much easier to make a beat, where I can go on YouTube and just look up drum kit, find a drum kit,
infinite ones, and just use it, and it's like, you know.
And so like it was not like that when I was first chopping up beats.
Pain in the ass.
Oh my god, I was just chopping up beats on Adobe, like, so
and
like, and nowadays
around,
like I can just like, even then if I like, I mean I have like, you know, my record collection over there. I have a huge record collection at home, and even then it's like if I don't feel like looking for a record, I can literally just go up and I can find a sample on YouTube, or I can find a loop pack or something online and take that, mess with it. And
the options are unlimited, man.
Right. And so it's like it's so much different now. It's way easier.
But I can't wait to hear what you come up with next, man.
Yeah, dude, I've been working on a ton of stuff. I I have a lot of different sounding stuff too that I would love to show you, because I think you'd be into it.
And I'm working on some of your beats now. I'm doing a song now called "You're Scaring the Ducks," which I have a little sample from Doug Benson, the stoner comedian, on it that you produced.
Oh, dude, I still need to hear that. It was funny because you sent me the text and you're like, I got Doug Benson on it. I go, the stoner comedian? You're like, yeah. I'm like, that's fucking dope. And I was like, I've always loved to work with you, man. Like I'll forever work with you. Like you're fucking,
appreciate it, Sam.
You're truly one of my oldest friends, and I'm honored that you'd have me on here. I'm
honored you come join.
I'm glad that we still work together, and like we're gonna work on a ton of stuff.
Yeah, definitely, man. You're
already working on a ton of stuff.
And mastering stuff. Hit up Pilze. He does a great job. So definitely hit him up.
You.
Throw him some money. Get some sick mixes. I won't mix my own stuff anymore. That was what I realized. Like I'm terrible at it, so I'd rather have someone like you or someone like Hush do it, or someone like Skippy do it. I'm like, fuck it, I can't.
That was another big thing to me. Like I was saying too, like I realized for like I knew my beats were always good. I was always good at picking samples. Like I know what drum sounds to pick and everything. Like my drums are on my beats are on point now. Yeah. My beats are on point, and I don't second guess my quality of music, but the thing is the quality of how it sounds to me is so important, and it's the thing that I lacked on the most. So I took a good year of just literally just not talking to anybody, sitting in front of a computer and watching tutorials and meeting up with other friends of mine that are I'd like to think much more talented than I am, and
they definitely
picked up like in the Bruce Lee sense. I picked up things that worked for me, where I was like, that makes sense, and other things that I was like, I would never do that. Right. You know what I mean? Or like, as far as like even just the way they did things too, would just be like, I realize I just think I do things a more difficult way because I don't know, maybe I'm just a difficult asshole. And I like things to be more difficult than they need to be. Oh, actually, speaking of which, too.
What is that?
It's Bruce Lee throwing a jump kick.
Oh no shit! I was looking at it like this.
so that's actually one of his symbols. That's one of his logos. I actually have a ton of Bruce Lee like clothing and stuff like that. I like still support his daughter and stuff like that. She runs his website, and so like that's
Shannon, I believe her name is.
Yeah, Shannon Lee. Dude, completely random, but do you remember WMAC Masters?
I don't think so.
It was a TV show that was on back in the day. It was hosted by Shannon Lee, and it was almost like a sketch martial arts show, if that even.
I gotta look this up. I've definitely never heard of that.
Oh, bro, it is so sick. It is so dope. Like, you gotta check it out. You gotta check it out.
I'm gonna Google that right after this.
Yeah, because it's wild, but it's like almost like choreographed fight scenes and everything like that. It's wild.
Sounds like the old Batman show.
Yeah, it's sick. It's dope.
All right, word, man. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Pilze Beats. Follow them everywhere you follow people, and maybe we'll get you on again at some point to talk about some other stuff. So,
yeah, man. I would love to be back. Have me
cool,
back,
man. All right, well, I'll talk to you soon.
Keep it rocking, I don't give a fuck how many times you gotta do it. The fact is, I'ma get it done and I'ma do it right. And I'ma have fun and I'ma body this motherfucking mic. Cause I'm motherfucking copyright. And that's what I do. Hello, Soma. Don't mind me. Y'all mean Soma79. Trying to get this motherfucking verse right. Go get it. Pilze Beats. Cut me up a line, you bitch. Check this whole shit out. Check.
They say my brain won't learn. Is it the way I burn? Or cause I used to be on E every day like Stern? Pitching past whatever your midget ass did in the past, hitting grass while someone shoves his hand up your bitch's ass. Your hoe let go, ain't no we get done. Hold your ex-hoe before we get stabbed up like Joey Greco. The dough we get go for 70 a sack, smoking the back of the 70s like the 70s are back. Try Hennessy and Jack, some moonshine from Tennessee and Yak. Promethazine, just anything but crack. I've been a king on tracks, they should crown me now the best pound for pound with 1,000 styles. They checked town for town and around for miles, then came back to Cowtown cause the crown is ours. Who gives a fuck what a hater say? Get up my dick killing me, slay your dame. I'll send her back to say my name. Been a king on track. I've been a king on tracks. They should crown me now. Man, ahead of my time. I've been a king on tracks. I've been a king on tracks. They should crown me now. You can't convince me. You can't convince me that I'm not.
Look, the way I spit bars, son, it's outrageous. I make my shooter sound the horn, Miles Davis. Look, soon to be the crowd favorite. I had to crawl to the top, homie, it's wild, ain't it? I study footnotes, I'm ahead of my time. Yeah, it's copy, Onest and Soma79, yeah. It's nighttime and I'm daydreaming. You trade mine, I crack spines, we break even. I'm Charles Manson with the balls. It took blood, sweat, and tears, but now I'm dancing with the stars. I'm in tip-top brethren. Feels good being quoted next to hip-hop legends. I bust metal, sending shots to the dust settle. I smut pedal, keep holes inside a cage kennel. Yeah, I'm trapping out a gray rental. I broke ties, I realized the game's mental.
I've been a king on tracks. I've been a king on tracks. They should crown me now. Man, ahead of my time. I've been a king on tracks. I've been a king on tracks. They should crown me now.
You can't convince me that I'm not. You can't convince me that I'm not. Holy shit, smoke moly, hole in a donut, cannoli. Pilze Beats will leave a hole in your ear like Mick Foley. Oh, you didn't know? I wrote this while sipping Stoli, listening to oldies, reminiscing about the old me. We smoke weed by the weight of a cinder block, then proceed to turn the beat into a goddamn tinderbox. So hot you could be molding a candle. Punch tracks with a beer mug till I'm just holding the handle. When it comes to this rap shit, I'm psychosomatic. You can't convince me that I'm not sick, cause I got this and I'm coming for your top 6. So just watch this ox clip while I drop this obnoxious toxic slop onto this absolute monster of a hot riff that makes the pavement on the block rip and all the paintings on the block drip. So why don't you get off this?
I've been a king on tracks. They should. I've been a king on tracks.